Do you guys remember a few months ago when I reviewed these two drones? There was the Mobula 6 HD, which is tiny, yet it somehow manages to fit HD recording into this little camera. Then there was the Tinyhawk 2 Freestyle, which is still my favorite drone to fly, yet it's limited to only being able to record its analog footage. Well, wouldn't it just be great if we could have the best of both worlds? The HD recording and the great flight experience, while still maintaining this tiny form factor? I think so. And a few of you guys had some things to say when I released that video as well. Which is why this week I'm finally excited to test out the Insta360 Go. Now, this camera isn't anything new. It's been around for about a year now, but with a somewhat recent update that added some FPV specific features to it, it's been gaining more popularity within the FPV community for the past few months. What it essentially is, it's an HD camera that is so small and so light that it can even be carried by, you guessed it, the Tinyhawk 2 Freestyle. Well, I've had the chance to play around with these two for the past few weeks, and, well, I'll make a little montage.
For the record.
Get this one thing clear. Get this one thing. Let's make one thing clear.
For the record.
Get this one thing. Get this one thing
So, I mean, for the size of this thing, I really didn't expect much, and I thought the image quality was going to be worse than it was. I'm honestly pretty impressed. In the first clip, to me, the footage seems great. The auto exposure did a pretty good job at keeping things bright, and the image looks clear. Then, after a few crashes, I did end up seeing a decent amount of jello in the rest of the clips, but I'm not sure if that's really the fault of the camera, since my props were no longer in mint condition. In the past, I have personally found that my other Insta360 camera, the 1R, was a little bit worse at filtering out vibrations than my GoPros were, but when it comes to this camera, I really didn't have a problem until I beat up my quad a little bit. Also, sure, the Go may not have as good video quality as the Hero 8 or the 1R, and it also has less than half the customization options as those cameras do. But I don't think it matters, because it's clearly going for something a little bit different. First of all, despite how small this camera is, it still has all the core functions you would expect from an action cam. It can take photos, time lapses, 100 frames per second slow motion, and most importantly for us, stabilized videos. In order to pack that into this tiny package though, we do have to expect some compromises. First off, while we're now used to shooting in 4K, the Insta360 Go only shoots in 1080p. It also has a simplified design. It doesn't have a screen to see what your shots look like, it doesn't have very many options for image control and customization, and it only has one button. But it purposefully strips away all of those core functions for the trade-off of simplicity, size, and weight. Because of that, I can mount this camera in so many different places that I would never be able to mount my other action cameras, which most importantly for me is on all of my smaller drones that don't have as much lifting power. If I place it onto my scale, you can see that the camera only weighs around 19 grams, which is almost 7 times lighter than my Hero 8 and even lighter than the new Hero 9. And if you hold them right next to each other, you can also see that the Go is less than 1/3 of the size. Honestly, until I held them side by side like this, I didn't realize how big the difference actually was, but it is pretty significant. Now, since a few of you have already asked, to mount the camera on my drone, all I did was tape a little piece of foam to the top, and I strapped it down using a zip tie. Let me see if I can quickly show you guys. So the camera usually just sits like this. Now, you guys might have seen my previous videos. I really like strapping cameras down like this in general because the phone helps to dampen vibrations a little bit, and it's also easy to adjust my camera angle. It might seem a little bit less secure, but I've crashed this thing a handful of times this week, and so far it's been able to keep the camera in place without a problem. If you're wondering, the foam I use is just from these makeup sponges that I buy at the dollar store. The ones that I found are a little bit more dense, and they're also a little bit grippy, which is nice. I find that the more dense they are, the better they tend to work. Now, when it comes to using the Insta360 Go, since there's only one button, it's pretty simple. The way I have it set up, all I have to do is hold down the button for 2 seconds to turn it on, and then I just press the button one more time to start recording. And the camera will vibrate and this light will start to flash. Now, when the camera first came out, the longest it was able to record for was 1 minute at a time. Luckily, after realizing how much attention the Go was getting from FPV pilots, they added a firmware update with an FPV mode that now allows up to 5-minute clips. By default, the camera will be set to record for 30-second increments. So to enable FPV mode, I had to connect the Insta360 to the app, which allowed me to choose what functions I want when I single tap, double tap, and triple tap the button. To be honest, I really only use it for video recording, so I set the single tap to the 5-minute FPV mode and have been solely using that. If I want to stop recording, all I have to do is tap the button one more time. Tap the button one more time. I didn't tap it hard enough. But anyways, tap the button one more time and the camera should stop recording. Now, this is probably where I should mention the other big compromises that this camera had to make, which are its storage and battery life. First of all, the Insta360 Go has about 6.6 gigabytes available for your video files, which equals about 22 minutes of recorded video. Yeah, I know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but you have to realize what this camera was originally designed for, which was to get quick B-roll clips which would last a maximum of 30 seconds each. Luckily, if I'm just flying my Tinyhawk around, I only have enough batteries for about 5 flights at a time, and this can pretty much capture all of them. In my opinion, the bigger limiting factor is the battery life. Because the camera is so small, there also isn't much space for a battery. Now, on the Insta360 website, it says that the Go should have around 60 minutes of battery life, but that number seems to confuse a lot of people because it actually includes the camera battery plus any extra charges that it gets from the case. Now, I read somewhere that the camera should be able to recharge 2.5 times using the carrying case, so that should mean that each charge only lasts around 17 minutes. Now, I tried timing this with a stopwatch, and that seems to be an accurate number. Again, when you look at the size of this camera though, I really don't know if it's fair to expect much more than that. Batteries take up a lot of space and add weight, so to get an HD camera in this form factor, there has to be a compromise. If I'm being honest though, I do think it would have been nice if the camera was just a tiny bit bigger, just big enough to last the full 22 minutes to fill up the camera's storage. For getting quick B-roll clips like the camera was originally intended for, the 17 minutes might seem a bit more manageable, but when you're filming 5-minute long FPV flights, having to charge it after 3 flights could be inconvenient sometimes. Anyways, let's move on to the charging case. The case looks a little bit like an AirPods case, and it also has these really strong magnets inside. that do a pretty good job at holding the camera in place. Now, when you snap the camera in, it will start to charge and will also allow you to connect to an external device to dump your footage. If you're an iPhone user, they make it pretty easy for you by including a lightning port right at the bottom that you can stick into your phone. For Android users, or if you want to connect it to your computer, they have a separate port, and they also included a micro USB to USB-C cable for this port. Now, once you're connected to your phone or your computer, you can open up the footage on the Insta360 app, or it's the Insta360 Go app. They have a specific app just for this camera, or the Insta360 Studio. And you can use either of those to pretty easily edit your footage. I personally prefer to download to my computer whenever possible, because you do lose a little bit of quality when you edit using the app. When it comes to usability though, both are pretty easy to use. One thing that I loved about the Insta360 software when I reviewed the 1R is that they allow you to make changes to your shots after you've already taken them. You can make adjustments to your footage, such as changing the width of your camera, which in the case of the Go, you get the option between wide and linear. Another cool feature is the ability to change your aspect ratio. The Go's lens is very wide and captures a lot of information in every direction. So you can choose to export your footage either horizontally for YouTube or vertically for Instagram without having to crop your already horizontal clip in order to make it vertical. This is sick, and I really hope that GoPro implements that in the future. You also get the option of turning stabilization on or off. For the Insta360 Go specifically, they also added a special FPV stabilization. This is because the Go's original flow state stabilization attempts to keep the horizon level, which could look great for certain shots, but it might not be the look you're going for if you're trying to do some freestyle. Here's a clip of the same shot with both types of stabilization. You can see that they're pretty different, but both look pretty smooth. One thing I noticed though is that when you mount your camera horizontally, like I do on my Tinyhawk, when using FPV stabilization or no stabilization, your footage ends up being rotated by 90 degrees, since the default position of this camera should be like this. It still stabilizes the footage correctly, but it forces you to use a different editing software to rotate the footage back. If you're using the app, you can use the barrel roll feature to rotate it, but that isn't available in Insta360 Studio for your computer. It's not a big problem, but it does add a few steps to my workflow. Luckily, this seems like something that could be easily fixed in an update, so I really hope that they do. But all in all, I've honestly really enjoyed using this camera so far. I love flying my Tinyhawk. I know I keep saying that, but this has just made that experience that much better. I think once you just acknowledge its limitations and accept it for what it is, the Insta360 Go is pretty damn cool. If you're like me and you just want an easy way to get HD footage with some of your smaller FPV drones, this is definitely an amazing option. Also, maybe you use your quad for racing, where most people are still flying analog and weight is a much bigger concern, but you just want an easy way to record an HD clip once in a while. This would probably also be your best bet. Or you could always use it for its originally intended purpose, which was a simple way to get B-roll shots for your videos. It has magnets on the back that you can use to stick it onto stuff, or a variety of sticky and magnetic mounts that you could use for various angles. So whether you want to stick it onto something and get an alternative angle of yourself while you're talking, maybe you want to point it down to get a shot of your sticks to get a stick cam, or even if you want to get a hands-free shot of you working on something, fixing something, there's a variety of mounts that allow you to mount it pretty much anywhere. However, if you're looking for a camera to get the most cinematic footage possible, then something like a Hero 8 will definitely be the way to go. You could also try making a naked GoPro build, which I just did myself, but I'll save that for another video. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed the video, just quickly hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe if you want to stay in touch. And I appreciate all of you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.